So we'll just kick off with some brief introductions, but also with a slight twist. So I would like you all, if you would, to just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about the company that you work at, what you do at the company, and also what's the biggest challenge that you're facing currently as a content team. Maybe we can start with Radhika and work our way this way.
Okay, nice to be the one to warm up the audience. So I'm Radhika, the technical writing manager at Mews. We have a team of 7 writers, and I think it's a big team. This includes an API documentation writer. The content that we are responsible for is release notes. We have help center articles. We do email communication and a whole load of other content. Going to the biggest challenge that we face, I think Stephan already spoke a little bit about it, is that producing large volumes of content at scale. When the product is scaling and, without scaling the content with the product teams and the product, but not scaling the burnout. I think that's the biggest challenge that we face today.
Great.
Hey guys. So my name is Alysa. I'm a content designer at Gen. And I think our biggest problem is consistency across all the products, because we have a bunch of different products. And as a UX writer, it's difficult to just agree on what the tone of voice and everything is for every product, and something to dive into.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Josh. I'm the marketing director at D3S. We're a company that provides software and technology to pharmaceutical and life science companies. So I deal with content both for the company, selling it and sort of supporting our customers, but also our products help guide content journeys for our customers or various stakeholders. And so there's a lot of different layers that we're involved in. And I would say the biggest challenge is having people care about content at all. I mean, it's really the biggest challenge is that I don't know what it is and I don't care. I think that's probably the biggest challenge.
Kind of a battle for attention type of thing?
It's not just a battle for attention. It's a battle for a kind of an anchoring in what it's relevant for and to whom, and identifying what the customer is or who the stakeholder is, because there's always so many people that you need to serve at one time. And what gets lost in content is that sort of attempt to kind of serve all constituencies at one time. And then you end up with this kind of general content that doesn't really serve anyone, and no one really cares about it or knows what it's for. I mean, this is what you talked about at the beginning. This company produced 250,000 pieces of content and 2% of it was read. I mean, that is hardly surprising.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jano. I'm from Bloomreach. We are a SaaS company and we create products for e-commerce businesses, specifically marketing automation. So imagine collecting data, using it for analytics and personalized campaigns. So Q personalization that you talked about, and also search. And our products are relatively complex, and there is usually not a single way of how you can get to a certain outcome as a user. And this is where I would also say it's one of the key challenges that we face as the content team, and that's that our products are relatively complex, and there is not a single way of using them. And because of the complexity and just the also differences in our customer base, it's quite difficult to find out if we are documenting the right problems that the customers actually have, and if we're really helping solve them. And we're really trying to stay in touch with the right teams, client-facing teams and whatnot. But that's something that keeps me up at night. And I'm just thinking, like, are we doing everything we can? Are we really collecting all the insights we should? Do we have all the relevant information and ultimately understanding? Because without that understanding of what our customers actually need to do, we cannot really provide meaningful content or instruction.
Nice, great. And maybe to dig into some of those answers a little bit more before moving on, Radhika, you mentioned scaling production without scaling burnout. How have you gone about meeting that challenge?
Well, 2 letters, AI. We started very early on when we didn't treat AI as a novelty, as a technology, as a novelty, but we approached it very scientifically in terms of looking at writing patterns and trying to understand how it would really help us or enhance our productivity in that way. So we went early into prompt development, and we realized that the prompt is actually the secret sauce for the content creation. And as Jan says, it's like we all mostly, we are into hospitality tech, so it's a complex product and there's complex content. So trying to use AI prompts for these nuanced contents was a tall order. But I think once you get into it, and that's what we did, we kind of, as I was joking the other day, we workshop the hell out of the prompt generation, and we got these specific content type prompts for our content, and we are able to now successfully say that some of our content is 100% AI generated. So that's how we did that.
Super. And Alysa, you mentioned consistency across multiple teams of content designers, and how have you approached that challenge?
So that's the challenge, because there's so many inputs. We have inputs from developers, from designers, product managers, from the user, from business side. And it's about finding that balance to create that consistency across all the products. I think we're still in the middle of finding out what works for us, but I do see AI coming into play in the future with components, copy components, with the design, so that we can automate processes that we don't need to keep reinventing the wheel for.
Yeah. And have you found that in your company, in your situation, is it content designers who are responsible for breaking those silos and ensuring that consistency, or is there some direction from leadership that's trying to make that happen?
I think it's equal parts. We're all advocating for our different roles, but we have to speak up about it for the user. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Thanks. And a couple of you have mentioned the user, the customer. Josh, we were talking about kind of the battle for attention, or the battle for relevance, or the battle to kind of create content that really hits the mark in terms of what people are looking for. So, what does it mean to you to have customer first content, or what does it mean to you to be really keeping the customer at the heart of what you're doing?
Well, it depends on the purpose of the content. And I deal with a number of different content areas. So there's the content which is designed for sales acceleration and lead generation, these kinds of things. And, we're looking at conversion rates. We're looking at, these various metrics that we can kind of measure. But, I took a sales training course once, and the instructor said something that was quite useful. It stuck with me. It was money follows pain. And part of the content approach is to keep that locus on the pain that is a point of identification, where people then find an anchor to care about that content. Another area of content that I deal with when I work with our clients is developing content for their stakeholders. And these would be like HCPs, healthcare providers, all the way down to patients. And they need to serve these doctors with content that both informs them and encourages desired behavior from them, but also gives them collateral that they can then use to educate their patients. So there's a sort of multiple kind of cascade of stakeholders. And this is really about personalization that is driven by data. And a lot of that is done through profiling. So it's really about like having an aggressive first party data strategy where you're trying to collect as much insight about your customers as possible in order to classify them or segment them in different dimensions. And part of that is understanding not just what content they need, but how they want to receive it. We've sort of moved from these very static approaches where you have this sort of single piece of content, you just push it out on all channels, to a multi-channel approach where you might tailor it for different channels, to this new kind of omni-channel approach, which is this buzzword in life sciences, which is really popular now, which is that content exists as a product of demand generation. People want something and then they get it through their preferred channel. And that content is then sequenced or tailored according to their particular journey and their attributes. So this sort of tagging of customers and using different data points to structure and guide the content delivery is becoming more and more important, especially as a way of cutting through the noise.
Nice. And when you said money follows pain, do you mean identifying the pain points of users and then somehow alleviating that?
Yeah, it's more like, they're the people who use our product. Jan's description of his product is a really good description of our product. It's just really complex. There's so many features. There's so many ways it can be configured. But the people who use it are very far from the buying process. So you're going through either corporate IT or procurement or through sales management, executive C-suite stuff. And they're making these decisions based on financial metrics. And there's always lip service to user friendliness and things like that. But you don't really know whether that's true until you get that product into the field. And it's a hard challenge to try and pull those insights up through the various levels to factor them into any given project. So, from the beginning, you're dealing with people with a different set of concerns than necessarily your end users. And you need to know what's driving those decisions. And it's one thing to say, you're going to be a lot more successful at selling something if you present the product as a solution to a problem or a challenge than just as an object of desire, right? People buy a car when they need a car, not just because, ooh, that's a nice looking car. I'll just go get that car. It doesn't really work that way. And the more expensive the product is and the more complex and sticky it is, right? So when you deal with these complex softwares that are deeply integrated into a company's processes and financial cycles, workflows, that kind of embedded system is very difficult to extract. So even if it's a SaaS software, which is, it's hosted, it's not on premise, the dynamics are very much on premise regardless. And so there's a lot of risk that needs to be observed and mitigated through that discussion process. And addressing pain directly is going to be the better way to cut through all of the sort of clutter that gets in the way of a sale.
Nice. Yeah. And Jan, you mentioned your stress-induced insomnia, thinking about users late into the night. So how do you sleep at night? How do you answer those questions about, are you meeting your new users' needs and delivering what they need?
I actually sleep perfectly well like a baby. Thanks for asking. Also, my Garmin watch tells me that, so that's a good thing. And we solved it with AI, right? Oh, just kidding. We did not.
We're done. We're done.
This is there are obviously ways how we could try and process and make sure that, there is going to be some sort of a feedback channel and somebody can submit feedback. And, if it's placed in the right places in the product, they're on the website, then we'll probably get more insights. And then we can somehow process it. There are ways you could probably do it, but what we ultimately rely on the most, and that's one of the things I'm trying to make sure that we do as a team and I do as a leader, is that we really just work well with the internal teams. One thing I'm really, really grateful for is that when I joined Bloomreach just shortly over 3.5 years ago, there was already a mindset that documentation is needed. So I felt like I had my work cut out for me in a way that the organization already understands that documentation is important because they saw the value in sales. They saw the value, how it's helping support. They also saw how they themselves are using it a lot. And they saw how, for example, if somebody leaves the company with a lot of knowledge, it creates a gap. So we really try and make sure that we try and capture that somehow. For me, the answer is we just have to make sure we build good relations with the right teams. We build visibility. That's something that not AI can really do. So that's, I think, along the lines of your human aspect, that's something that will still continue being relevant. You'll have to have relations. You'll have to have connections. You'll have to be visible. So one of the things we've done over the last year, when we realized that there is maybe a slight dip in the suggestions or maybe connection with some of the teams, is that we just looked at the onboarding process, for the whole company and also for some of the key teams. We just got plugged into it. We started speaking with the teams more. We go on some all hands or departmental meeting. We try and explain what we do, how we can help them, and encourage them to just give us feedback and have these conversations. And ultimately, after that relationship is built, we get deeper understanding as well and open up doors. So yeah, for us, this is where AI has not helped us as much, but rather the humans still have.
Yeah. And thinking about onboarding, especially with those complex and sticky products, whether they're SaaS or on-premise, onboarding is really, really important. And the faster you onboard, the faster the time to value and increased revenue. And you want to keep that onboarding process as short as possible and keep your queue as short as possible. Do you feel in the kind of actions that you've described, looking into onboarding, have you been able to make a dent, and speed things up or make it easier for users to onboard at Bloomreach?
So now you're talking about if we helped onboard users that actually use our product.
And
right?
you're talking about onboarding new employees, no or yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was talking about onboarding of new employees, which could be just fantastic partners for us.
And have you felt that, your efforts have paid off in that regard? And,
definitely.
and how do you know?
So I just see, because I even just by looking at names, like who starts contributing, for example, and even anecdotally when I start reaching out to people, I see that, oh yeah, this person has recently joined. They saw this talk. They reach out to me in Slack on DM. I then tell them, look, there is a process in this Slack channel. Go there, and they start coming there. I wouldn't say it's a silver bullet. I wouldn't say it's necessarily that once you are plugged into the onboarding process, that it's a done and dusted deal. You have to keep reminding that you exist and that you are important and that you can help the teams ultimately. But it is something that has helped for sure. We've seen it in the rise of just number of suggestions, and also that it's newcomers that started
Are suggesting.
submitting.
Yeah, nice. Okay. I want to move from talking about kind of what you're doing in your teams, maybe to the limits of what you do and what you don't do, and kind of the misconceptions about what your role is, what your scope is, what your impact could be. And maybe we can start with Alysa, because I think there's maybe some misunderstanding, what's a content designer as opposed to a UX writer? What's the role of a content designer? Do you feel that there are, misconceptions about your role, or do you find yourself explaining what it is you do and what you don't do and what you can do?
Sure. So for content design, we're really just focused in product for the experience for the user. So I think the biggest misconception is that we're editors or proofreaders, which is not the case. It's not just about writing content that's quick and easy. We have to factor in many inputs. So from developers, from the PM, what are our customer goals? What are our business goals? And trying to translate that from a very complex situation into something very simple. And that takes a lot of effort and a lot of time, even though it's just one sentence or even half a sentence, So that's the biggest misconception.
Nice. Okay. And your title is content designer, not UX writer.
Yeah, but I think they go hand in hand.
Yeah. Have you been a UX writer in previous roles?
Yeah. I think it's just a matter of naming. I think it's the same. UX writer and content designer is on the experience and advocating for the user. It's not copywriting, it's not technical writing, but in product.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. And Radhika, how about you? Are there any misconceptions about, technical writing and what it does and should do?
Well, especially with AI in the mix, I think there's this larger misconception which is building over time, is that, content creation is just editorial. And in fact, I believe that it's purely strategic in terms of also the delivery, the format, the structure, and primarily the outcomes that you want to achieve for the user. And when it comes to outcomes, I'm very close to user outcomes. In fact, real world user outcomes, especially in hospitality tech, because what you think that the user might be doing is not really what the user is doing in the real world. So keeping it close to the user outcome is really important. And I truly believe in this principle of purity of purpose. Every piece of content should satisfy some concrete, real world user need, nothing more and nothing less. So that's what it's important. And that is possible only with the human in the picture, keeping true to the outcomes. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And we were talking about, content designer versus UX writer. And I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, so forgive me. But we were just talking yesterday about the technical writers. You have this technical writing team, you're a technical writing manager. But over the last year or so, our use of AI has really shifted what the technical writers are doing on a daily basis, away from just writing all day to, working with AI and then doing something a little bit different. What do you think about the future of the title of technical writer in the age of AI?
I don't know. I am somebody who is not so stuck into the verbs, like because my title says writer, therefore I have to do some writing, So, writers in this world need to be analysts. You need to have data-driven insights. You need to be cross-functional collaborators, So there's a lot of social capabilities that you need to have. There's some sort of developer insight that you need to have to communicate, or being the bridge of communication between the developer or the engineer and the user. Like, hey, I know you mean to say this, but this won't be understood. So there's many hats that we wear, on a day-to-day basis. So I'm not really into defining myself. In fact, if I go into defining or coining a role for me, I would be limiting myself. So I'm really truly okay with still being a technical writer, but donning many hats as my role demands.
So, yeah. And maybe that's a common misconception, that technical writers only write, and that's the limit of what they do.
I think anybody who's worked, like you could ask a PM, a product manager at Mews, and they would actually tell you what a technical writer at Mews does. So when it comes to education, I think when you start working and evangelizing and talking about user advocacy, I think user advocacy is our superpower. As content creators, everybody sees the value, and then you no longer need to evangelize. People know the value you bring. Yeah.
Super. I want to move to talk about tooling before we move to talk about personalization and scalability. And we'll talk more about AI. So leaving AI aside for now, Jan, are there any, I'm sure you're using a lot of tools, but are there any tools that you're using that you really like, that you think help you be more effective in your role?
And this is excluding AI for now.
Excluding AI for now. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Or tell us the tools that you don't like.
Gosh. Well, I think, in practice, there is maybe 3 key tools I would say that are super, super useful for technical writing, or maybe just even quick writing on the go. Maybe you'll butcher me for this one, but I think that if you're trying to do a quick edit, Grammarly is a fantastic resource. It just helps you do a sanity check, especially if you're not. It does have a bit of AI.
Well, so we won't count that, but yeah.
But especially if you're not a native speaker like me, I'm just a Slovak guy who learned English as a second language.
And you're writing totally in English? Content?
Yes, we do. And we like to joke that sometimes when you think of a formulation in Slovak and then you try and put it into English, it's like Slovglish. It doesn't really make sense in English, but it's that weird mix. Anyhow, but so Grammarly is a valuable sanity check. One super valuable tool that we use is a CMS. It's called README. I don't know if anybody here knows it or uses it. We find it pretty useful because it's relatively simple, but it does a lot of things out of the box, and it saves us a lot of custom development hassles when it comes to just making even some minor changes to the content, and it even takes care of the API reference relatively simply. So that's nice, at least for documentation. And another tool, this is maybe not special, but I love Slack.
Sure.
When I started using Slack, I just realized how much fluff there is in emails that's just not adding any extra value. So Slack is super valuable, at least in my opinion, because if we're trying to just, I don't know, get more information about XYZ, you just get it faster and more instantly. So yeah, if that's maybe the more boring answer. Okay. Outside of AI.
I'm curious, how many people in the audience use Slack at their place of work? Raise your hand. And keep your hand up if you love Slack. Okay. All right. Well, they're on your side, I guess, more or less. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm not sure. My opinion is still developing. Okay. What about you, Josh? What kind of tools, useful tools are you using?
Okay, but they all have some kind of
AI components.
So,
yeah.
right, all right. I use one tool called the Hemingway Editor. You can get it like Hemingway app. This is great. I'm a bit of a wordy person. I speak in paragraphs and I write in paragraphs. And by the way, the other big challenge, going back to the first question, localization. This is a big thing because we have to produce content in lots of languages, and that becomes a bit of a pain. And since I'm one of the main content writers, it becomes a nightmare to translate my wordy paragraph like sentences. So Hemingway Editor is great because you can set a grade reading level. And I always shoot for this 8th or 9th grade reading level. Yes, because people don't like to read, and most of the content you produce is being crawled by robots anyway.
Exactly.
They're functionally illiterate. So it's great because it really flags. I get this big red highlights with my typical sentence that I have to cut down to yellow or green or whatever. And I find that a very helpful sanity check on myself. Though sometimes I just have to be like, listen, man, I'm just gonna have to write the elegant sentence I want.
Needs to be long.
It just needs to be long. It's gonna have to be. But that's a tool that I come back to a lot. And I don't know if it's so much AI. I don't use its rewriting prompts.
Yeah.
I just use it as like the algorithmic check on like how many
to
words.
flag things.
Yeah. If I'm using like passive sentences and stuff like that, I find that's very useful. And when I've A/B tested blog posts, not written using my, I think, great prose
Beautiful language
versus this robot optimized prose. I mean, it's night and day, right? So use Hemingway Editor, just a simple like release notes, and our SEO goes up, right? Like we go up in the page rank on Google because it's just friendlier for automation. When we get into the AI conversation, I think we should also talk about who's actually reading our content.
AI is talking to AI, right? Yeah, we'll get there. And how about on the content design side, Alysa? Any, I'm sure everybody's familiar with Figma, and but any secret tricks and tools that you're using?
In Figma, there are some free plugins. So there's Writer and there's Ditto. So with these, it's interesting because you can plug in your style guide and use them as copy components with the design. So you can replicate them in different designs, but we're not using them at our company, unfortunately. I just know about it. But something that I really like separately is Google Trends, is you can compare different terminology based on region, based on time. And it's just cool to know. You can just research for your own curiosity what's being more used.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, same.
Especially for UX.
Yes, exactly.
Super. And Radhika, how about you? What's your favorite tool?
Well, I don't play favorites when it comes to tools because I think at Mews, we keep switching so many tools. But right now we use Slack. I particularly like Beamer, which is a platform which we use for publishing our release notes because the insights that we get are tremendous. We've been using Gainsight a lot for getting or keeping in touch with our users in terms of the feedback. We are writing in Salesforce, which is not really we can't even call it a CMS, but we found a way to work around it. I would love to say we have a love-hate relationship, but it's like kind of a hate relationship, but we're finding a way around it. And maybe I'm going to be the villain here, but we write with AI prompts, like most of our, if not completely, then first drafts at least are with AI. We're building new prompts now and refining them so that even the help articles are going to be produced with AI prompts. So the basic writing is done by the prompts. Yeah. And we've had great success with it. Particularly in terms of release notes, we found that when we gave a particular structure based on the feedback that we received, that we sent out in terms of questionnaires, we do surveys in Gainsight, and our users are very, I'm really glad for our users. They're very interactive, and they actually told us what is the structure that they would like. And when we found that when we stuck to that structure and formulated it as a prompt for the release notes, we've got tremendous feature adoption. We've got great sentiment scores, which we measured on Beamer. So it's been really useful.
Nice. And can you just talk for a minute about Beamer and how that has kind of transformed release notes and the reach of the release notes? And, how is Beamer different from what we did before without a tool for release notes?
Oh my God. I mean, if you have to talk about, I would say Stephan, he's the hero because he's the one who introduced Beamer here in Mews. I mean, I remember when we did product days, and I was like a team of one at that time, the lone technical writer, and we were doing user interviews, customer interviews, and people were saying like, what's release note? Like, we don't know release notes. And I was so disappointed and like, oh my God, where am I? Like, as a writer, what is this? Nobody knows release notes. And from there, we've managed to turn it around completely to users giving us feedback that we have a designated person to follow release notes so that we can build on our SOPs or like train our staff to change when we need to change the SOPs. So it's a very interactive, like insightful, if I have to say, tool, platform. And we can also communicate directly. I really value the direct feedback. There's not many opportunities, that you can have where you can connect with your users directly, and Beamer gives that opportunity. So within our release note, we've built in like a closing sentence which says like, please give us, your if you like the feature, can you give us a smiley? You can comment on it. And I'm disappointed our community manager is not here, the Beamer community manager, because she's had some great anecdotes about users like, no, this doesn't work. Comments like that, because people were not even sure. The users weren't sure that they would be like somebody is responding at the other end. And we had this goal of having actionable feedback. And when finally the users realized that we do factor in their feedback is when the actionable feedback started coming in. Hey, this is not working. Could you change this? And that's when we became that important channel between the user and the product team. So we're developing these features. So, hey, this is the feedback that we're getting from the users. So, tweaking the product a little bit, the feature a little bit. So it's been really helpful in that.
Good. And moving then to the topic of personalization versus scalability, another one of those significant challenges that I think content teams are facing. And this idea of defining success. I think all of us here on stage, no matter the discipline, we like to think and we desire that our content is serving customers, that it's meeting customers' needs. And I think often, success is obviously based on whether or not it's serving customers. So I'm curious to hear from each of you how you're measuring success, how you're measuring, whether the content that you're producing is meeting user needs. I think in the case of knowledge management, the user could be internal, in the company as well as potentially external. So maybe we'll start with you, Jan. I mean, how do you know you're doing a good job, essentially?
Good question.
Your boss told me to ask.
So firstly, I'll just maybe say like who exactly is our user base, because that also differs, and then also the job to be done kind of differs, right? So obviously we have internal users who use our public documentation and also internal documentation. We have our clients who use it as in a similar way as users. We then have our partners who look at it again through like a similar lens, I guess you could say. And then an interesting one is prospects. That's one that we have not maybe like touched upon a lot, but that's one thing that maybe not a lot of people realize, that content, especially product content, can not just help existing users, but actually help you drive a lot of like new revenue. It can help maybe generate leads. It can help existing prospects in the funnel, maybe just inspire more confidence. And just quickly, I would just say, like, this is a fun fact that we found people in the sales stages, like in the sales funnel, like when they're going through our Bloomreach website, like roughly 50% of their page views happen inside of the documentation, which is maybe not that surprising, right? Because they're already evaluating us against the competition. So, but that's one thing that's like really, really important as well to distinguish. So if we're talking about like, if we do a good job, I would love to say we have like some sort of a fancy tool where we have like sentiment, numbers, and this and that. I'll be perfectly honest that like it's mostly a lot of anecdotal and qualitative talking with key leaders across the company. I really try and stay connected, and I'm trying to like make sure that our team does the same with, for example, our support team, that we stay in touch with our client services. Like that's, for example, where we get feedback that, yo guys, like you recently launched this AI search, and even though you made a UI revamp to make it stand out more, people still don't know about it. So maybe there is something else that you can still do to raise awareness. Sales is a very similar story. Like I try and make sure that I speak with our sales folks who then give me feedback how exactly it helps us. And we have internal programs where we find out where, for example, for sales or like prospects, where maybe documentation helped and where maybe it did not. Like we have these reports that like ultimately look at. So TLDR, a lot of talking with key leaders and key teams, because that's maybe like also, I believe we should have better numbers, and I'm trying to make sure we get there. But at the same time, I believe a lot can get lost behind the numbers.
Sure.
And there's
The
a lot of
metrics
that
trap.
context, exactly as you said. So yeah, ultimately that.
Nice. I think you touched on something really interesting. And, typically we would differentiate product content or technical writing from product marketing by saying that product content's focusing on current users, product marketing's focusing on prospective users. But what you said, which aligns with what I've seen, is that in fact documentation often serves prospective users who are, investigating and researching, and they're reading these help articles to get a sense of how the product works, how complex it is. And so it's not just serving the need of current customers, but it's also creating potentially leads, for future customers as well.
Exactly.
Nice. Josh, how about you? How are you measuring success?
Well, I mean, I take a broad view of content. So this includes everything from business emails to web copy to release notes to product documentation. I'm with Jan entirely. Having deep content, this is where people do research, and, being able to provide customers with relevant content based on what they're interested in, that gives them that depth, I think is key. But I mean, I measure the success of an email as, did somebody write back to me? Did they write back to me with more questions, or was the question answered? And, early on when I started my job, I was really frustrated with the quality of communication by my colleagues. There's a kind of habit I've noticed in this country in particular. People they'll just ignore an email for days or weeks because they'll be like, I don't have an answer yet. It's like, well, tell them that. Tell them you're working on it. So, I mean, really, it's what is the fundamental purpose of any content? You're communicating something. You're engaging with another human being. And if you're holding on to something until you have the perfect answer or whatever, you're not delivering something. You're breaking that communication funnel. And I think that's the kind of preeminent thing I always pay attention to is this going where it needs to go? Is this the message that needs to be delivered? Is it being delivered to the right person at the right time? I mean, it's the old sales adage, right? Right message, right customer, right time. But it really works for everything. And that's really the core measurement. If we're talking about web copy, obviously you look at conversion rates and stuff like that. When our sales guys are presenting collateral, we use our own CRM system, which is the thing we're selling, and this tracks all media usage. So I know how much time is being spent on what slide and what channel and what context. So I'm able to see how people are navigating through the content path. Are they getting to the end? Are they getting to the key claims? Do we need to shorten this? Do we need to optimize this? Because how much time do people have for a meeting? How long are those meetings lasting? And what can we get in? What are the kind of key things? And it really depends on what the customers are looking for. This comes back to profiling. You want to make sure that sales are always going out with a good brief, so they're focusing on things that are relevant. I mean, I've killed so many demos in my early career by feature dumping on people instead of asking the right questions to qualify the meeting. What do they care about? What problems are they addressing? People have really short attention spans, and you need to meet that moment with clarity and relevance.
Right. Yeah. And I think that gets at the heart of this question about production, producing more content, and volume isn't the answer. It's relevance, ultimately. Just out of curiosity, what tool do you use for emails? Any specific tool, or are you just sending out, emails from Outlook or something?
I don't know. I have one account. It's in Outlook. I hate it. I use MimeStream for other stuff, which is vaguely better.
Okay.
Is there an email that's great? So let me know. Email's email. I don't know what to say about it.
Nice. Alysa, how about you on the content design side? I'm sure success depends on exactly what you're designing and building at the moment, but how do you go about setting up metrics? How do you go about measuring success?
I think the main thing is the question if the user can accomplish what the feature or the product is supposed to do. Like, do they understand it? Can they finish the task? And that's done by user research, by usability tests, mainly retention. We're not trying to convert them. I mean, that's also a metric, but it's mainly about keeping them in the product, using it. If they're able to understand it, that's the main thing.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And Radhika, maybe you can talk a little bit about user disengagement and kind of the Mews approach, which is maybe counterintuitive around success.
Yeah, it's quite amusing because whenever I talk to other content people and they're like, oh, you're trying to drive user disengagement, that goes contrary to so many, so much in terms of digital content creation. And so we are into hospitality tech, as I said, right? And in our part of the hood, our users are people who want to be free from screens. They want to do their real job. That's delivering real world hospitality experience, right? And we want to empower them to do that. We don't want them to be navigating help articles and all these documentation. So that's what we want to do, have clear, concise, actionable and accessible content at the exact point of need. So that's what the user disengagement that we're talking about. Yeah. So it's like, while the world is measuring engagement metrics, I am presenting user disengagement metrics to the world. So, but it's great, honestly.
And you can learn more about it in her blog, which is featured right there on the other screen.
Yeah, I mean.
So then thinking about the need to strike a balance between personalized content and scaling, producing more content for more users, and those users want that content not to be more generic, but to be more, relevant to them. I know that at Mews, with some of the tools that Radhika's mentioned, like Gainsight and Beamer, this gives us the ability to really target specific users or specific regions for different types of content that we're producing. How are you, the rest of you, approaching this? Do you feel, maybe we can start with Alysa, do you feel a pressure to be more personalized, to create more tailored content, or has that not really, come into your world?
Since we're focusing on security products, so antivirus and parental controls, it's more about giving the user more control. So more features and ways of making them feel empowered. But we also do localization and for a bunch of countries. So that's a big thing. But it's also about not using jargon to make it accessible for as many users, as many countries as possible when writing in English.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And how about accessibility then? Are you looking at the new laws that are coming into play, or is there a conversation around accessibility at GEM?
I think not yet, but it's a very interesting topic. I've also attended some courses and things online just for my own curiosity, and it's really interesting. And I think that's the future too.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. And then, on the marketing side, obviously you're trying to scale up. You're trying to reach more users, more customers all the time. Are you able to, produce one message and blast it out to everyone, or is there a need to really tailor content to specific audiences, Josh?
You can answer that.
Yeah, you can answer that too.
I think for our company, it is just a one shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. For Jen.
But providing a multitude of features or providing as much kind of
Exactly.
Okay.
And simplifying it in the way we explain it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Nice.
In terms of like our commercial operations, everything has to be hyper personalized. The generic stuff is the website, and then, maybe something that gets put on LinkedIn. But, this is, enterprise B2B sales. So you tailor the content according to the needs that you're addressing and the brief that you build around each prospect. We work in healthcare and life sciences, which is really heavily regulated. So you're dealing with different types of regulated entities that have different regulatory concerns that need to be addressed kind of first and foremost. And they have different processes. You might get some companies, they focus on pharmacies and retail drug sales. Others are focused on primary care or specialty care. There's different scientific aspects of their work. So it's really about sort of understanding, having a discovery call, kind of understanding what that prospect's looking for. Usually we track back on the website. We look at what content they're looking at the website, what they're downloading and viewing. This gives us an idea of where their interest is when they come in at the end of the funnel and sign up for a demo or a sales meeting. And then what we do personalized demos. So we set up demos that are around those business cases. And one of the main content delivery platforms that we use on the commercial side is Loom, where we then make it, Loom is like one of these like personal YouTubes, right? You can record your screen, you make your videos, you put it on a private channel, you can send links that are either public or just for the people that you share it with, and then they can comment on it and give feedback. And you can track whether they viewed it and how far they viewed into the video. And these are really useful analytics because it gives you an idea of whether the content that you're delivering is relevant. But I do find that there is more and more of a shift away from text to video to other types of content delivery. And we're moving in that focus more and more video and more personalized video where we just create demos. And we have certain also demo like video content that we can sort of cobble together, on spec just from a library, which is useful as well. So those are tools that we do.
Yeah. And you mentioned, creating user personas, but it sounds like you're not only doing that, but then also looking at the behavior of prospective customers and then tailoring the content to their behavior.
Exactly. And knowing what to follow up in the next call. This is also part of it is just outreach, right? You're looking for any potential trigger to have a relevant next conversation because, in between one conversation you have with a prospect, you've got any number of other vendors having conversations with that prospect as well. So you want to sort of keep sort of at top of mind for these people. And the only way you're going to do that is by being relevant on that level.
Nice. Yeah. And Jan, I imagine even thinking about the internal side and the internal onboarding and stuff as the company grows, which, hopefully it is, I'm sure it is, you're adding new people from different backgrounds and different roles and the onboarding gets more and more complex. Somebody who's onboarding in sales probably doesn't need the same information as an engineer who's onboarding. How are you kind of going about meeting that challenge or just generally kind of facing personalizations?
I mean, at that scale, if I think about, I don't know, say like key 4 or 5 teams that I try and make sure know about documentation, like each of the teams should know different things about documentation. But at a scale of 4 or 5, like it's relatively easy for me to just do it during the presentations and during the communications. So there we're not really talking about anything super hyper AI stuff. It's just me trying to like choose what exactly makes the most sense for that specific person. How can they benefit off of it? And that's that. So yeah, that's maybe more of a boring answer, but on that scale, at least that's how it works.
Yeah, nice one. Okay, and now I want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is AI. And so we've mentioned a couple. Radhika talked a little bit about the shift and the prompt design and everything. Josh mentioned Hemingway. Who's using AI in a significant way?
Everybody.
All right. And
who is not, right?
Well, that is a good question. And who is but doesn't want to admit it is another question, maybe. But so, Jan, tell us a little bit about what's an AI tool that you're using. How are you using it? How has it been successful for you?
I mean, I think just the most simplest one is ChatGPT, right? I mean, that's something that I use on a daily basis. Even when there's a situation, I'm just trying to find out what exactly should I do. Like either say it's a managerial problem that I'm trying to solve. Even that is something where I'm like, I want to do a sanity check if I'm doing it right. Even that's a thing that I can use ChatGPT for. I could try and ask somebody else at the office or a mentor, but say I'm working from home and I would have to text somebody. I'm just like, ChatGPT, like, what would you advise me to do in this situation? But technical writing related, we have an OpenAI subscription specifically to access the API side, so like more the developer oriented, LLM access ultimately. So it's not like the regular user interface. We have a bunch of others like Notebook LLM and whatnot. But yeah, AI has been just absolutely transformative in helping us write content faster, helping us identify like how to structure it and so on. We also have implemented AI in our documentation on top as search. Like I think that when it comes to content, AI is transformative in 2 ways. Maybe I should have started there before I went into my answer, but it's obviously to generate content faster, better, more concisely according to high quality standards and obviously faster. And secondly, it's to access that content. Like for example, for us, for each of our products, like as I mentioned, our products are pretty flexible and complex. Last time I checked, I think the engagement product is like 400 documentation pages, something like that. That's quite a lot. And if I'm a new user and I'm trying to just learn something, or I'm a prospect evaluating, like how the hell do I find what I need? Like there's obviously navigation, there's regular search, but asking AI is just the quicker way to get to the relevant information. It takes fewer clicks, it's faster, just makes sense. And this is ultimately what's super transformative. Interestingly enough, I don't see it as often and I don't see as many tools adopting it. But yeah, these are, I think, like the 2 key ways. And one thing that I would maybe like to call out that I found very interesting, where I had like a bit of an aha moment during the last couple of months when we were tinkering with AI more and more deeply, is that it's very funny how AI sounds very ominous, right? Like, oh, it's this entity that knows everything. So I just give it a simple prompt, I give it something, and then it's going to give me a fantastic result, right? Well, not really. And we found that the best way to get great outputs from AI is to really treat it as a person in a way, which sounds very counterintuitive. But maybe all of us know stuff about prompt engineering, right? Like you've heard that you have to make the prompt very specific, intentional, ideally provide examples, even try and use positive enforcement or reinforcement rather than negative reinforcement. I don't know if there is like some sort of an emotion.
Just in case. Yeah.
I guess that helps to be polite. But also, even a seemingly simple task as writing documentation, right? When we tried to get good edits, it was just struggling. It was just missing something. And we found out that what really helps is break the process down into a few steps. Like even if you're an AI, like try and make sure that you understand what is the intent of the documentation of this specific article. who exactly is the user, what exactly is the topic about, what is the goal of the article. Once you understand, then proceed to the next step. The next step is, okay, so based on the context you have, try and outline a structure first. Then it outlines a structure, and only then we'll give it more information to try and populate it. Then it populates it based on some standards that we give it. We also provide some guidance based on the type of document or article that we try and create. It could be a guide, it could be a reference, it could be a help article, whatever, that may have different standards or different aspects about it. And then once it does that, we ask it to feedback based on, again, all the previous steps and some extra on top. And we found that it just works way, way better. So if you're wondering how to use AI for whatever tasks, we found that this helps not just for content writing, but also for anything else. Just try and focus on one step at a time, be intentional, be specific. It helps. It gets, for example, ChatGPT, if you have the user interface, it does get pretty smart and it can do a lot of things in the background. If you have a paid subscription and maybe use deep research, maybe you've seen how it does a lot of things iteratively based on the context. It's pretty smart. If you're using something dumber, for example, we were experimenting with this OpenAI developer interface. There, it doesn't really have that, so there you have to be even more intentional, but you can still engineer those steps in it. And it's ultimately, what we found works a lot. So long answer, but what are the AI tools? Ultimately, simple LLM models, and there is a bunch of tools, whether it's just ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, whatever. We use it for different things. Different LLMs, different tools have different strengths, and we try and use them accordingly.
And do you find that what you've described about being intentional and breaking down the prompts, and do you find that at least some portion of the time that you save using AI is taken up by the intense kind of guidance that you need to provide it?
It's a good question. It definitely does take up time, but it requires us to do more of that thinking and also iterate faster. So I definitely think it's more efficient. This is maybe also the question for my team in the back of the room, so feel free to catch them after. But I definitely think it's an efficient step forward, and it's something that will be invaluable and will help us produce better content faster.
Nice. And Josh, maybe this isn't totally accurate, but my impression is that you're a little more skeptical about the role of AI in producing content in the future. And, is AI coming for every writer's job?
No. I mean, maybe. There'll just be more bad writing out there. Look, we had a call before this, to talk about what we were going to talk about. We got a little bit testy. I did. Anyway.
You got a little.
I got a little testy. I mean, look, I'm a heavy AI user. For copy, I draft things through Claude. I do data analysis using ChatGPT. It's good for, creating tables and working with that. I use Perplexity for research, shifting different models. I use the Hemingway app. I use Loom. This is great. I have I use Fathom for note taking. I record the calls with this AI note taker. It does really good minutes. It's always the purpose to save myself time and effort, right? And get an output that's useful and I can distribute. The thing is, though, is that there's been this, I think, incorrect belief in Silicon Valley among these companies, from Meta to OpenAI, Microsoft, where they've just doubled and tripled down on this idea that if they just scale enough, both in terms of their data ingestion and in their compute, they're going to somehow achieve AGI or advanced general intelligence. And, if you just look at how many times there's been sort of prognostications announcing that ChatGPT 5 is around the corner, which is supposed to be the AGI model, and it never comes out. Now we've got 4.5 or whatever, because there are, they don't work on a neurosymbolic level. They're essentially predictive text models. When you talk to ChatGPT on your phone, it's using a standard voice-to-text transcription, and then it's analyzing that text. So, I mean, I've gotten into shouting matches with ChatGPT, and it just doesn't understand that I'm angry. And certainly can't figure out why I'm angry. And I'm angry because it keeps hallucinating. It keeps making stuff up. I'm angry because it's wasting my time and not saving it because it can't even remember the prompt. And this is a problem, right? I mean, this is why I think you're smart to work within a developer's API, because you have a lot more black box control. But even in a paid model of ChatGPT, I mean, just use it. Give it some instructions. Tell it to give you yes or no answers and see how long it can keep that up. It's like talking to a bratty child, a very well-educated, super intelligent child, and you have to correct it. I mean, I've tried to use it just for release notes. I've given it like the prompt. This is the structure of our release notes. Here's the raw data from the developers. Here's the linked issues where everything's described. Give me release notes. It's just full of redundancy, jargon, made up statistics. Oh my God, does this really save users 12% of their time? Because I didn't know that. Where did you get this? And I'll ask it, how do you know this? Oh, actually, I don't. I've argued with this thing about Trump, and it'll just give me like just the vaguest answers. I'll be like, I'll ask something, is Trump a fascist? I mean, there are definitions to these words. You can have your own opinions. That's fine. I just wanted to have a discussion with ChatGPT about this. And it's just giving me sort of these watery, vague things. And I'll be like, after a certain point, I'll be like, look, I've prompted you not to give me pablum, to give me generalizations. Just tell me if you can or can't answer this question. And then it's like, no, I can't. Okay, bye. So I do think that there's that frustration point, and you have to balance. And I think, Jan's right. You have to get really smart at your prompt engineering. I think Radhika has gotten that nailed down in her process. And I think that's really, this is the most important thing you can take away. You have to control the child. You have to build the child's pen and keep it there. You have to make sure that it's working with data that you've controlled and given it, and not pulling out of the mystical universe, which is where this is. Sorry, this is what I meant by testing. I get really like hot to the collar about this stuff. But I mean, this hyper dependency on AI and the fact that people are using it to phone in. And now there's just garbage all over the internet. And this is just killing SEO, because what's happening now is do the keyword, do the Google Translate, do the keyword search. And what used to come up was, industry websites, relevant content. I'm looking for a product. Now I get bullshit blogs about that, which are essentially link farms. So someone can make money through further clicks. I mean, it doesn't actually save anything. It's surfacing the wrong kind of content, and it's garbage. And what was hilarious was after April Fool's Day, where all these people started putting out these like fake blog posts, April Fool's Day posts. Suddenly ChatGPT is feeding this to me like it's fact. So control the child. You'll be fine. But I'm skeptical that this child will really grow up. I think there needs to be a fundamental change in the foundational models that are used. And I wish there was more investment going into exploring other models and doubling and tripling down on what I think is fundamentally flawed heuristics.
Nice. And Alysa, in there we go. Take a bow. How about in content design? My understanding, or in my experience with the team here at Mews, AI, very promising in a theoretical way, but when it comes to the practicalities, a little bit more complicated. How do you see AI influencing content design in the future?
Yep, I completely agree with Josh here. I feel like it's just more frustration than usefulness, in my opinion, just my personal experience with just prompting this thing, the amount of time and amount of effort than to just use my brain and write it. It's just, I would rather do it myself. But because content design, I think it's different. The whole situation with getting the prompts from the developers, making sure it aligns across the entire experience. The AI can't know what the previous screen was or what the future screen will be unless you screenshot that whole thing. But then you need to screenshot the whole product, So there are limitations, but for drafting, as a sparring partner, I think it's really useful. In every other area of life, I think it's super useful. ChatGPT, for example. But there are free plugins like the Writer, the Ditto that I mentioned before that could help automate processes that are repetitive. But for the most part, I think ChatGPT is very limited for content design.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks. And Radhika, I mean, what's your secret to success? You mentioned the prompt engineering, and you went into a bit of detail about that. Was it a difficult shift to move, to lean into AI over the last year or so? And do you feel that it's been worth it?
Well, we had a very spirited monologue here, but so I want to start with, start with the advantages in terms of the usefulness of AI. We have to, and we need to keep this in mind, that you just cannot take out the human aspect out of this content process at all. You can never do that. There are different types of contents, right? So, and the more creative, the more nuanced your content gets, the lesser and lesser effective the AI is. So we should always remember that. So you have to choose the type of content that you want to use you want to generate with AI. Also, data insights. I mean, the interpretation maybe, but I think it needs a human to analyze the data or understand your user. And that is another aspect, that the strategy. You cannot, like we were talking the other day, and decision making. You cannot replace AI for these functions. So now I can comfortably move on to the other topic, the content types, which you can generate with AI. I totally agree with Jan. It's prompt engineering is very specific. In fact, that's a science. And the fact that it needs a human to develop a prompt is in itself a success, right? As a human, you need to understand. And I think, honestly, based on my experience, as you said, large language models, right? So you need a language expert to train an LLM, because what you need to do is, when you create the prompt in itself, we have these 4-tiered process. One is establish the role of the for the task that you want. Like, for example, all our prompts start with, as an advanced technical writer at Mews. So you set the role for the prompt, and then you give it context, what you want. And then you give the audience, the target audience, you specify the target audience. You also super specify the task at hand. You give the structure that you want the output, whether it's a help article. We have super specific prompts, especially for help articles, where you have a introductory paragraph which satisfies what we like to call the 7 W's. Who does this? When? Why? Where? What is it about? What's the weird thing about this? What's the wonderful thing about it? And then we have the navigational element. Then we have the main content, and we always finish with a closing sentence, which is for further learning. You can learn more about something else here, and you would be amazed that when you have the information input in this prompt, it does bring out the article the way you want it. It's really amazing. So, I mean, there are people who say that, I forgot about the delimiters. You have to give it delimiters, though it kind of acts like a spoiled child. You tell it, 100 words only, and it always fails in terms of it can't do the math. It's also not good at math. So 100 words, I'm going to see how I am, I can. So it always doesn't really, but it's good to have some delimiters. What we've observed is, we, of course, in technical writing, it's well known, we work with active voice, but it doesn't seem to understand that. It kind of disagrees, so it will throw in the passive voice. Sometimes you filter out that. So, I mean, it does a very, very good job. And if you establish right from the beginning what are the content types. So I would say the most routine, like the release notes, is something. In fact, Josh, you would be very much interested. We have these release notes which talk about in terms of user stories. And it's amazing. We gave it a list of phrases that it could use when building a story, and it does that. Imagine this or picture this, and it will give you a story and then talk about the feature. It's just crazy. So if you know your child well, like what is good at, what is not so good at. Maybe it would just like,
Can work
you just
better.
like work your way around it and so on. And that is primarily why we have been succeeding. And I have to really attribute all the success to my team here, because we worked together. It was not like Radhika nailed the process. We workshopped. We've used, like, we always follow refine and test. We don't rest on our laurels. We keep on refining it. We keep on testing it. So it's a combined, it's a team effort. Yeah.
And I could stand here all night in my green jacket. But I want to open it up to some questions, and then I want to have a sandwich. So in 10 seconds or less, I won't be counting, but in a short way, in your line, in your discipline, knowledge management, marketing, content design, technical writing, what's one piece of advice that you would have for teams who are in this situation that we've talked about, facing the pressure of AI, facing the pressure to scale without adding headcount, facing the pressure to really prove in dollars and cents, the value that they're bringing to the company. What's one piece of advice you'd give to knowledge management teams? No pressure.
Make AI your friend.
Nice. Very succinct.
Put AI in a box and lock it. Was that a serious question? Should I actually?
No, that was a serious answer. You're done. That's it.
Experiment with as many tools as you can.
I'm going to use all my 10 seconds. Be open. We are a tech-savvy, tech-first generation. So be open, not just to AI, to all forms of technologies. Use it to your advantage and clearly identify what are your advantages and work towards them. And I think it's high time that we became analysts. So writers as analysts, definitely. And cross-functional collaboration, very important. Work with your marketing teams, work with your product teams, work with your knowledge managers, and work for your user audience. So, yeah.
Super. Okay.
All right. So another tool I use, Headline Studio. It's really good for like headlines for SEO. That really works. But the thing is, they just introduced this AI that recommends improvements to your headlines. Well, here's the thing. This is the kicker. I then say, okay, I take the suggestion, then I run it through its checker. It always gets a worse score.
Go figure. Thanks, everybody. Do we have any questions from our audience?
Yeah, thanks a lot for this panel discussion, and thanks for organizing the event. Following up on the topic that AI is like our child, what do you think it means for professionals who are just coming into the market, junior copywriters and junior people who are just trying to enter the profession? Because right now we're kind of like look at it from a perspective of senior people. We can explain to AI, we can know the perspective of customer insight, personalization, like we have these years of experience to back up. But what advice would you give to people who are just coming in? Because like AI is basically our junior guy now. So what would you advise to the junior?
Do you have the question for somebody specific, or?
No, just go ahead.
Go for
I
it.
would love to use the opportunity since I have the mic. I would say you still can use it as a mentor. Like obviously it can feed you stuff or like it can give you advice that's going to be BS, and it's obviously always up to you to make the judgment. But I use AI to even just for exploration of new topics, like how can I get better at this or that? Or for example, what's a concept or way of thinking about is I have not explored. And just that creative aspect, in my opinion, like is just challenging the way I have thought about things in a limited way. It opens up my mind. I still have to apply judgment and double check it somewhere else. If, for example, technical writing practices, right? Like that's something that maybe, I don't know, AI can get really funky there. Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. Like it always depends on on specifically the situation. But I would say you can still use it as a mentor. You have to apply judgment though, and you have to just treat it with caution. But for exploration, it's fantastic.
I think that's. I mean, I use it just to bounce ideas off the wall and try and access knowledge. I use AI to explain concepts because it's sometimes just better than Googling something and getting a bunch of stuff. I'll just ask the AI, what do you think about this? But one thing that's really good is if you're using different models, run the outputs from one model through another model. That's often a good balance check. So, I find that the copy that ChatGPT generates is pretty terrible. So I'll run that through Claude, which is just much better than that, for that. And then the other thing is like you said, you've got to check it, just don't forget the human element. It's a machine, it's a robot, it's not a person. And I'm a lot more forgiving of a mistake from a person than I am from a computer.
Yep. So, liver showing Washington.
Exactly what Josh and Jan said. I think it's great for exploration and narrowing down what you need to focus on, especially as a beginner.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good. Just using it as a debating partner. Like what concepts do you need to know? What things should you explore? And then just narrowing it down with more specific questions. And I think you can get a pretty good idea.
As somebody,
So like, it is on.
It's on.
is it okay? So I would give advice to somebody who's coming new into any profession. Is like you have this, adage saying, learn the trade, not the tricks of the trade. So I think AI is just a trick of the trade. It's not the trade itself. If you don't understand technical writing, you will never be able to work with AI successfully, because AI is not really the trade. So it's important, like any profession that you come into, it's important to be competent in that profession and then use AI. If at all we're talking about just AI, but yeah, it's just a trick of the trade.
From my perspective, I totally understand that you can be curious, you can use the tools, you can learn new things. But I'm more meant like, what does it mean for the job market? Because do we need junior people anymore? Because we use AI as junior labor, as something that we can train to explain. And when you come as a new person to the profession, you usually do some a smaller tasks, smaller researches, smaller writing pieces. So I wanted to kind of get your piece on how would you treat a junior person, right, coming to your team?
Okay. I think I understand your question now. I think that, for people entering the market, having a literacy in AI and keeping up to speed on the way these models are evolving and consistently testing their boundaries and capabilities, that literacy, I think, is fundamental, right? Whereas previously, back when I had hair and I entered the market, my main qualification was, I had an education in writing and, I had some of those skills. Now you have AI that can do a lot. And I think that something that people who are older are a little bit more afraid of is, without that literacy, are they still going to be employable, right? So I think working with these tools is key to being employable going forward. But I think also being able to use them effectively and in a way that you're in the driver's seat will then make you more competitive than someone who's just phoning it in. Because what I've noticed quite consistently and increasingly is people use AI just to not have to do the work, to not have to think. And honestly, if you're just a person who uses their own brain and thinks about things and asks questions and asks good questions, that's the most important skill. I mean, if I think of anything I learned in university, it was just how to ask questions. And that was the number one thing that I got out of my education. And I think that being a curious person who asks questions and thinks about things and doesn't just phone it in or outsource it all to AI, that in itself will get you a job.
What is it?
I think also for just making your portfolio, it's a good feedback partner, just to get an idea of what we're looking for in the market, right? When creating a portfolio, what are the metrics? What kind of things could you be aiming for? But even just using the job description as your target, reversing it and seeing what companies are looking for and using that to your advantage.
I think knowing a bit about prompt generation is really important, because yes, we are moving towards that. So if you can build and you know how to build good prompts, it's going to help you a lot. So maybe you focus on that too. besides the core stuff? I would again add, yeah.
And I would just say that, studies show that with teams who are using AI in their work, the lower performers get the greatest advantage. So AI levels the playing field. And if you're an expert and a high performer, the advantage you get out of AI is less than people who are underperformers, and it brings everyone, down to that level. And it is an ongoing question of, will AI do away with junior, roles? But I think to flip that, you can more quickly become senior if you know how to use AI to build your skill set and to produce things that are beyond the level of what you might be able to produce only relying on your experience that you have so far. But I think, any way you slice it, it's not going away. And the more quickly you can use it as one of your tools, the more advantages you'll have.
I'm Pavel. Part of my larger team is a team of content designers and tech writers, and I love all of the insights. I've been slacking all of the notes to the head of documentation that could not have been here. My question is, if there's one thing your organization can do to make your jobs easier, what's that thing, and why is it not happening?
It's a good question.
For me, right? So we're not using it. And I think what could help is the free plugins in Figma. So for example, Writer or Ditto, because then you can implement your style guide and have this consistent tone of voice and copy components. So you don't have to keep writing the same CTAs across everything. It could already be programmed, or you can just take it from your copy components and implement it based on the situation. If it's a subscription, if it's an error message, for specific instances. And I think that would save a lot of time and solve the consistency. And it's a free plugin.
Hello, my name's Joel. I'm a technical writer. I work in Radhika's team. And Josh, I really liked your anecdote about, you talked about trying to sell a feature or a product to a customer, and you realized that you were just talking at them and not asking them any questions. I think this is something we all know. If you've ever been on a bad date or at a tedious dinner party, talking to someone who only talks at you and never asks you anything is extremely painful. And I think being online kind of feels like this sometimes. Algorithms are making decisions for you. Everything's being trying to get your attention, shouting at you, talking at you. But it doesn't really feel like nowadays anyone's asking you, what do you want? What do you need? Like, what do you actually want out of this? And so my question is that, like, when you create content, how can we make content more of a conversation with the user and less of a statement of talking at them?
Also a good question.
Well, I think Radhika kind of answered that in part before by saying how you guys, in your approach, you have, for every part of your release notes, you're soliciting reactions, smiley face, negative face. That has it's a little bit conversational in that sense, that it's engineering a feedback loop. It's possible that maybe Jan's approach is a good way to do this. I was just really thinking about that, using the ChatGPT or the LLM, not just to create content, but to allow users to interact with it. I think that's a really clever idea. And I'd like to talk to you at some point about how you pulled that off exactly. Because I could imagine that would allow me going through the product documentation instead of trying to find some reference. Because I find product documentation, usually just really impossible to go through. I'm a person who gets confused by IKEA instructions, right? So, it's got to be really clear. And the idea of being able to ask my IKEA instruction, like, you just show me how to do it, or like, how does this actually work? Like, to be able to converse with the content that way, semantically, I think could be a really powerful approach. But if you're just talking about the content as laid out, I'm sorry, but that's just a one-way street, man. You're just reading a sign. Interaction requires interactivity, and that requires another tool set. I don't think that you can create static content that's self-interactive. It doesn't really work that way, unless you were able to structure your technical writing as like a choose your own adventure, you know, where you decide like the wings stay on the plane, the wings fall off, see what happens next. Maybe you could structure it that way, but I think an LLM approach sounds really good. How did you pull that off?
So when we were thinking about how do we introduce AI on top of our documentation, we got pretty freaking lucky that README, the CMS where we have our public documentation, they announced that they're actually developing this. They call it the Owlbot. So it's running on ChatGPT ultimately. It's only trained on the public documentation. So even if you have some hidden stuff, it's not using that. And it simply gives you an answer based on that. So we got pretty lucky that it's something that was literally out of the box and we didn't have to do anything custom. But even if we had to, we'd probably go down that route because I'm a firm believer that it's a big value unlock. And README is the name. But
Everybody's learning something.
But yeah, I think that LLMs could be one way how to make it more conversational. Maybe this is not the right answer to your question, but I'm thinking to make it more conversational along the lines of tone as well. I think that expectations change over time, right? Gen Z lingo and stuff like that. Like there's more and more obviously younger users, and if you've ever read, for example, Slack release notes, or I don't know if you've seen Shopify and their product announcements, like they do ridiculous stuff to show off how they can just really slap creativity and time on it.
This feature.
Yeah, I mean, it's not conversational per se that you as a user can actually converse with it and give feedback, but it does feel conversational. That's maybe one thing that struck me from your question, that conversational can mean different things. Getting philosophical here.
But I think we're moving toward a space where when you're using a software or a tool or you're on a website, the website or the tool is going to know that you have a problem before you do. And it's going to pop up and say, hey, it looks like it's taking you a little too long to fill out this form. Boom, boom, boom. Here's how you do it. And so the need to go and find the documentation, I think, is not a permanent situation.
You mean like wizards?
Yeah, like interactive chatbots, but something that would know exactly what you were doing in the tool at that time. And it knows that, for example, if you're creating a bill in a PMS system, it knows that a bill should take 20 seconds to create, and you've been on that page for 50 seconds, and it pops up and guides you through the process.
Okay, but I want to do a snap poll of the room. How many of you have been on a website and that annoying little Clippy style chatbot comes up, and you're like, okay, I'll chat with you? And how many times have you continued down that path? And how many times have you just said, human, talk to an agent? Yeah, I want to talk to an agent. Like, raise your hand if you consistently ask to talk to a person.
You don't like Clippy?
Nobody likes Clippy. And Clippy's taken over the world now. So, I think until that dynamic changes, AI is not replacing anybody's job. Not really.
This is a very hot take that I would love to contest, Stephen, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely agree that chatbots, and just the word chatbots, it's just carrying a stigma around it because of how crappy it worked and how crappy the logic and just unuseful it was. We actually released a new product that's called Clarity. I apologize for the shameless plug, but the reason why I'm bringing it up is that it's actually a conversational shopping assistant in a way. With ChatGPT, the expectations of conversations and also of chatbots, it's changing with time. And the interesting thing I want to bring up, and this is not anything secret because we already have this on the website. From the testing, we saw really strong improvements, on the RPV, so revenue per visits. So when you think, for example, and this is maybe not content as such, but I still think there is a point to be made. When you think of an e-commerce experience, how many times you're just really struggling to find what you actually want, right? You have to go through the navigation, through the naming, etc. It takes time, and there is a lot of decisions that you have to make. And AI can help you alleviate some of those. It alleviates that decision making for you. There is also a bit of a threat. I forgot what exactly it's called, but it has a name. This phenomenon that people psychologically tend to believe automated outputs. So for example, if ChatGPT or a system recommends something to you, even though it may actually be false, you tend to believe it more. So there's maybe also that bit of a psychological element that's playing to it. But the main point that I'm trying to make is that, like even chatbots, for example, can really alleviate a lot of those, like I would say, like decisions that you're trying to make. And that's a big value proposition. And chatbots will be forgotten with AI. Like in a year, or like let's say, somebody new that's young, for example, my nephews who are 13 years old, like they won't know what chatbots were. They'll just remember the new and working ones.
Yeah, and I think it's also about sequencing. I mean, in order for that to really work, like I think the e-commerce example is really relevant, but what underpins that when we talk about training an AI or creating prompts aren't just the semantic prompts. It's really about building a solid data strategy. So let's say, for example, you're Rolik and people are shopping, and I would look up, for example, lactose-free mozzarella. It'd be really nice if it could take a clue from that. If there was some profiling or tagging that would then, when I look for other dairy products, it surfaces in the ranking lactose-free options at the top, right? That would be a kind of a good personalization within an automated framework. But that would require a data strategy that says, here's how we're going to dynamically segment the customer experience, building a return query list based on search inputs and related tags. I mean, I think Amazon has done that to a large degree pretty well in terms of customers like, also like, you may also like. But those recommendations, I think, could be a lot smarter by, again, focusing on the pain or the problem. I'm looking for solutions to a problem. I like to eat cheese. I can't eat cheese. What do you have for me? Right? I think if the sophistication goes in that direction, then it starts to be a little bit more useful, and then I don't need to talk to somebody.
Nice. Let's wrap it up there and continue the conversation over in the other room. Thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks to our esteemed panel.